whoa, Spike Mafford, a Seattle kid, except that he was born in Mexico. His parents, no, his parents are both working artists, so he grew up surrounded by art, like his whole lifetime, his whole house, everything, art, art, art. Yeah. So I think of your art as photography, but photography doesn't seem like a big enough name to cover what you do. Like, you do so many things with it, but it's mostly photography.
It will all be revealed.
And thus, we're ready to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate this on a beautiful fall afternoon that you take the time to come into the dark screening room. My name is Spike Mafford. I chose that name myself because my father's name is Mike Spafford, and he's a well-known artist. You've seen some of his work in the lobby here. He started getting credit for being a photographer, and I was getting credit for doing some murals, which were a bit controversial back in the 80s. So I knew at that point that I needed to change my name from Mike to Spike and Mafford from Spafford. I switched the letters around there. So I'm going to show you a few things here and talk about my life as an artist and how I tried to be a scientist just to escape the world of art. This is your introduction to the National Spikographic Society, of which you are all now members, so congratulations. The dues are quite reasonable, and so we've got that taken care of through the office here, so don't worry. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and just let this roll. Here we go. You may recognize this tune. That's right. Welcome to the National Spikographic. It's not really appropriation. It's an homage. Just, I have to say that for for legal reasons. This is just an overview of a few dramatic travel images that we've made over the course of our adventures. That's my wife, Lisa, who's here in the audience. This is with us in the Lacandon jungle on the border of Guatemala and Mexico. We put this kayak together that we travel with and went out with the Lacandon indigenous population. This is in Mexico with the during the Day of the Dead celebration. Sorry, the quality's not very good. I'm not a very professional photographer, clearly. This is where I get into copyright infringement. That's right. Okay, so the National Spikographic Society started out as a way of generating income before I was taking a trip. And what we did was sell photographs before they were made. So basically, you're buying a subscription and funding a trip and banking on the fact that I'm going to make a photograph that you're going to like well enough to own it. It was a leap of faith for a lot of people, and the first time I did this was in 1991 when my wife and I traveled with a band that she was managing to China, and I needed to raise $4,000, so I sold I sold enough prints to make the trip. And it was on that trip that we really got together and solidified our relationship, and we've been traveling ever since. This article came out about us traveling to Mexico in 1996, and it talked about the National Spikographic magazine and the subscriptions and everything that we did. It was really exciting. We were off on our wedding adventure, and then this letter came in from the National Geographic Society telling us that we actually couldn't use the National Geographic yellow trademark bordered, I don't know, but it was polite. It says, the trade dress and its elements are trademarks of the National Geographic Society. Your use of them for your own commercial purposes is a violation in that trademark, and we ask that you refrain. Surely you recognize the value of the creator owner of intellectual property, and you would not wish your original work to be appropriated, however creatively or cleverly done. Well, I actually had 3 attorneys willing to represent me going up against the National Geographic Society based on parody rather than appropriation. I didn't take them up on that, and fortunately I was able to work with the National Geographic Society on a commercial project in a couple of years after that. So I'm going to run through a couple of slides fairly quick and describe what this is. This is going back a little bit to my college graduation, and this is where Margaret was talking about how I do more than just take photographs. I've long been interested in the idea of environmental installation and the experience that one can have in walking into an environment that's been augmented by objects and photography. So I made these large-scale black and white photographs and installed them in the gallery, as well as creating this kind of diorama environment where you were coming around the corner and staring into a really bright light, kind of like this projector, and you can't really see what's going on, so you put on these sunglasses, and then you're seeing what's going on in this environment. The photographs were all nude self-portraits in the desert with a skeleton. Of course, I was, young and influenced, I think, probably a little bit by the art world around me as I was growing up. As I said, both my parents were artists, and I went to Pomona to major in science. I was a marine scientist, and I thought I'd be the next Jacques Cousteau. But once I got there, I found out it was actually a pre-med program, and that really wasn't the direction that I was going for. So I went into classics for a year and took a course from a professor that had taught my mother, which was a mistake because on the first day of roll call, he brought that to the attention of the class. And anyway, art was my true calling in the end, and I've been pursuing it ever since. I started a gallery in Seattle here in 1986 with some friends called Galleria Potato Head, and it was designed to showcase the work of underrepresented artists or young artists, and it had a great run. We were open for 10 years in a number of different venues. One of them was on 2nd Avenue right in Belltown, and for this exhibition on the Day of the Dead celebration, which was something that I had experienced in Mexico and was profoundly affected by, we cut a hole in the floor and built a grave in the gallery, and you could kind of peer down inside of it. There wasn't a skeleton in there, but there were some other artifacts. Also, you can see that I suspended these black walls, which created sort of a labyrinth environment where you were required to walk through and be put a certain distance from the photographs. You couldn't back up too far, but the other thing it did was it created this black backdrop so you didn't get a lot of reflection in the photographs, because I found the glass to be an invasive element, the reflections anyway. And then this article was written by Regina Hackett, and this was some of my first real press, and I was buoyed by that. It was exciting. Buoyed, yes, lifted up. And so then also in 1991, I did this installation at the Bellevue Art Museum back when it was in the mall. I don't know if any of you remember that, but it was kind of a cool environment. And there was an exhibition called Earthly Delights, and it all revolved around the mall environment. And so I collected food from some of the vendors and made this large-scale American flag out of the food that was thrown away every day, and documented its transformation. The docents at the museum came to me 3 days after I installed this and asked me to remove it because it was starting to smell. So I said, okay, and I went over there and I had about 30 boxes of Arm & Hammer baking soda, which I lined the inside of the enclosure with, and then I put those little plug-in air fresheners into the ceiling, screwed them into the track lights, and the next day they came back to me and they were like, "It smells so nice in here. It can stay." And over the course of 6 weeks, this American flag rotted, and I photographed it almost every day and put the photographs up as it was transforming. Anyway, it was a statement. That year was also the year that Lisa and I traveled to China. That was an incredible trip, and it was an amazing experience. Too many memories really to go through. It would be boring, but got to see a lot of really interesting places and experience a lot of really interesting food. I haven't eaten Chinese food since 1991. Then in 92, I did an installation at the Seattle Art Museum. Again, this is using photography as a certain aspect to it. These votive candles that are inside all of these 47 drums, which this represents a pyramid, and this was for a show called 1492-1992, 500 years after Columbus. And these photos are actually, or the votive candles, most of them are photographs of votive candles that I did with 4x5 film, and they're lit with a little LED flicker, like a randomized flasher. And it really looked like candles. And to this day, I still have people ask me how I was able to light these candles in the museum. Right after this exhibition went up, about 2 days after the show opened, Lisa and I drove to Mexico, and that red van that was on the intro video was the vehicle that we took down. These are a couple more installations, just to give you an idea of how I utilize photography in different environments and ways of telling a greater story that goes beyond just a single photograph. In 2000, I got to take a trip with the whole family. This is my folks, Elizabeth and Mike and Lisa, my wife, and our twin children, Juno and Callan. And we went to Greece to trace the origins of the labors of Hercules. My father, I don't know if you know, he's Mike Spafford. He worked quite a bit with Grecian mythology. And so we we went to find the places where these myths took place, and we found them. It was incredible. Sadly, the portion of the trip was cut short when we were en route over the mountain pass to get to Sparta, and my mother broke her ankle fairly severely. You can see in this photo, there's a cast up to her hip. We were at a military hospital, and they thought that was required. Fortunately, Lisa was able to break her out, and we got her on a plane back to Seattle, and they operated on her at the University of Washington. And she was fine. So here's an example of, let's see, this should be playing. There it is. What this is showing you is first the photograph and then the painting that my father did on top of the photograph. This is the Erymanthian boar, and this is the Lake Stymphalos, where Hercules slew the Stymphalian birds. This is the Cyrenaean hind, and these are the stables of Aegeus, where Hercules had to, one day, to clear out the stables. What he did was he dug a river and diverted it so that it would wash out the stables. And then we worked on another version of the same kind of collaboration, but around Washington State. And I traveled around and created images in various locations that I thought could be relative to the myths. And then my father made these woodblock prints that went on top of them. And I thought I was so smart. He actually made the prints before I made the photographs. And I took a acetate of each print and I laid it into my camera, and I used that as a guide for creating the images so that when we went to make the final prints, they would line up perfectly. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'm taking so much time. I'm being really thoughtful. And then when he saw the prints, he printed different images on them. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And that is the true nature of collaboration. You have to let go. And especially working with a parent. I don't know if you guys have done that, but it's challenging. It was great. And of course, his decisions were correct. He was thinking even more formally than I was, and saw things that I didn't see. So that was a real great collaboration. This is an example of how some of my work actually relates to some of the work that my mother, Elizabeth Sandvig, has done over the years. She's done a series of paintings that are bird songs in a variety of different languages. But this is a sonogram represented in a physical form. So it's actually the sound of the bird as it's translated into a visual form. And what I was doing was working with Braille text and laying this text over the top of the images. So in a way, also talking about a visual representation of a text. Here's a few images of life after 1998. We had twin boy and a girl, Juno and Callan, and we didn't really stop the adventure travel. When they were 6 months old, we went to Mexico with them, and then when they were 13 months old, we drove to Mexico from Seattle with them in our VW van. Thankfully, I'll never do that again. But it was impressive. We had traveled before that throughout Mexico and been well received, but once we had our kids with us, people really opened up and really seemed to understand why we were there. We didn't need an excuse like we were working with some organization or something. It was about family, and that was really that was very rewarding. this map shows you, gives you an idea of the roads that we've traveled throughout Mexico driving. In green, they're highlighted. So we've gone all the way down to the tip of Baja and then taken the ferry over, and we've driven all the way down into Guatemala. We tried to drive into Honduras, but there's a rule that you can't exit the Guatemala within 30 days or without leaving your vehicle. I don't know exactly what it was, but we had to leave our van in Guatemala, which was really sketchy. And then there's some photographs here that show just me working in various capacities. I photographed a lot of original documents, and I'm working on this series called Longhand, where I'm utilizing text and documents from the countries that I've made photographs in and laying them on top of them. And I just love the handwriting. My mother's mother, Mata Polly Sandvig, she was a librarian, and she was the reason that my folks were in Mexico when I was born. She was working for the largest library, English library outside the United States in Mexico City, as well as working for the State Department and smuggling pre-Columbian figures back into the country, just for personal use, of course. Anyway, so we've done had a lot of experience in Mexico and worked with lots and lots of different organizations. And every time I go back, I bring back photographs from the previous trip, and I try to make sure that I get those prints returned back to people. Oh, those green things in the back, they're called piñas, and those are agave plants. They're used to make mezcal. And this gentleman here is a palenquero or a mezcalero, and I did this portrait of him holding up a turkey that is something that he puts into his still when he makes mezcal. Little special ingredient. Yeah, better than a worm. Okay, so again, with the idea of photography being the driving force to create an environment, I worked with MBBJ and 2 Union Square, which is a large building down on 6th Avenue, 6th and Union, to redo all of the elevators when they did a remodel. And so this took about 5 years of traveling around Washington State and photographing the forests and the trees. And these are three-sided backlit elevators. So when you get in and the doors open, you're walking into this forest that's got light streaming through the trees. It's really pretty. And spending all that time in the forest was really important and also very influential. And looking for the perfect photograph was a real challenge, because I have always done documentary work. So basically, I don't alter the environment or my subjects other than to engage with them if they're human, and ask them to, first, if it's okay that I photograph them, but secondly, if they, if I want them in a certain position or the light or, whatever's appropriate. So spending all that time in the forest made me very, very aware of them and how it feels. There's something called forest bathing. I don't know if anyone has heard of that, but it's real. It's a rejuvenating experience. And so with that in mind, I'm working now with a local artist, Preston Singletary, who I believe there's a piece here of his. Yeah. So he and I are middle school friends, actually. And we've had our own careers and our own paths. He's got a family, and we're still friends. And I used to actually photograph his work commercially, but now we're collaborating and making art together. And so our project right now is to create these large-scale backlit photographs, similar in feeling to this, but with some of his work and sometimes photographs of him in that environment and others. And I'll get to that in a moment. This is an example of all the different images that you might see in the elevators down at the 2 Union Square. And because now this is a photograph that I made on the Olympic Peninsula in the Macaw Reservation. And these are cedar trees, and this tree has had the bark peeled by indigenous peoples some 70 or 90 years ago. They would utilize the cedar bark for many, many aspects of their daily life, from floor mats, ceilings, hats, clothing, but they would peel the bark but not take so much as to kill the tree. So the forest remains living and the trees are viable. Another example of getting deep into the forest. And here is a photo of our van taken from a kayak on the north end of Vancouver Island just last summer. These photographs show the direction that Preston and I are working in right now. So we've got his original artwork, and we're taking it out into the landscape. And what we're doing is sourcing the locations based on stories that revolve around his clan identity, which is the Killer Whale Clan. His family is from Sitka in southeast Alaska, and we have been trying to find different stories that revolve around the Killer Whale Clan. So this summer, we were all supposed to go up to Alaska and do some testing. He had to back out at the last minute because of a big project that he had come up. But Lisa and I went to Alaska, and we met with this fellow here, Lance Twitchell, and also with what was his name again? He's an ethnologist at the Sea Alaska Heritage Site, and Lance is a professor at the University of Southeast Alaska. But you can see, what? Chuck. Oh yeah, Chuck Smythe. That's right. Anyway, it was a really interesting trip, and we resolved a lot of issues and troubleshot a lot of challenges with taking heavy lead crystal glass totems that are manufactured in the Czech Republic, shipped across the planet, and then shipped up to Alaska, and then dragged out into the wilderness in the pouring rain. There was a weather event while we were there that was deemed of biblical proportions. Rained 6 inches in 4 days, and there was a huge mudslide in downtown Juneau. But this image gives you an idea of the scale that we're going towards. The final pieces are 10 by 30 feet. So really an immersive environment that you can walk into and get a sense of scale of the forests. And the forests up in Alaska, I don't know if any of you have been up there, but they are like the forests of Washington State 100-fold. They're that much wetter and that much greener and that much bigger. It's really phenomenal. This map gives you an idea of southeast Alaska, and this is Juneau here, way up here. This is an enlargement of this section. And the place that we're trying to get to first is way up here at the top of this inlet, Teneke Inlet. It's called Keet Goonie. And this is a photograph that came off of, might have been off of Google Maps or something. But anyway, the story is that the killer whale people were able to dig underneath this small section of land, which will join Port Frederick with Tlingit Inlet, way up here. And they did this by, just digging and digging and digging. And eventually they created a hole underneath this piece of dirt right here, this land mass, and are able to transfer between the inlets. And this is a story that goes back a long time and is now owned or essentially by Lance Twitchell, who you saw in that photograph previously. So we're tracking down stories like that are disappearing and looking to revitalize them with this new technology and ideas about presentation. If we can, we're going to travel this exhibition, and right now we're talking to the Tacoma Art Museum about showing sometime in 2028, maybe. You can see it was pretty wet, and Lisa put up with a lot of trudging around in the water-soaked forests of Alaska. It rained so much that we had to ditch our Gore-Tex, our beloved Gore-Tex, and buy rubber clothing. It was really wet. And next time I'm looking forward to doing it in the snow. So here's a picture of Preston with some of these lead glass crystal totems and the gear that we took, and that's how we had the work shipped up to Alaska in these crates. So you can see it takes up a fair bit of space and is not really easy to trudge around the countryside with. Getting it up to Keat Goonie is going to be a challenge. Just taking a boat there from Juneau takes anywhere between 8 and 14 hours. Seaplane would work, but there's no place to stay up there, so we have a lot of logistics to work out. This is an example of how I'm working now to put together images that are composite images that aren't captured in a documentary fashion. So I'm creating these images in the camera, but then adding them together to create a final presentation. And towards the end, once the image is fully assembled, then I adjust color and tonal hue and luminosity with the idea of a final print. So that gives you an idea of the scale. It's actually 99 inches long. And this is what the image looks like. So you could see in that little video that all these things like this tree and that tree were added. In fact, this tree and that tree are the same tree, just different sides of the same tree. And this light that is kind of emanating from that point was that feel of the light was generated by physically zooming the lens of the camera. So because I worked in film for so long, I've learned a number of techniques that are applicable to the digital world, but not often used by people that are using digital cameras because it's just not common. But anyway, adding the ferns in the foreground, everything was there. This butterfly, I don't know if you can see that, but I waited about 20 minutes for that butterfly to fly through. I'm sure Ansel Adams would be laughing at me like, 20 minutes, whoa, you know. But that's all it is light and timing. And in assembling an image like this, it's all in a similar forest. This was done at Mount Baker Lake. And it's in a singular environment. And these elements all exist. They're all real. I haven't added anything. I've just composited them in a way that I felt told the story or gave the feeling of the environment. After having spent so much time on that project looking for the perfect forest for the elevator series, I realized that it was going to be actually more effective if I built that image myself. This is another example of a composite scale image. The final size print is about 80 inches long, and it's made up of a whole bunch of photographs of this one environment that created a panoramic image, and then I superimposed this image here, which is of Preston, that I created out at Islandwood on Bainbridge Island. Here's some images that speak to the process of making the work happen in Alaska. You can see I've got a laptop that my camera is tethered to because I'm creating these massive size files. This is a 100 megapixel Hasselblad digital camera, and as I was setting everything up, you can see I have strobe equipment, and I mean, it's a lot of gear. It's like $60,000, $70,000 worth of gear, and then it starts pouring rain, right? And so we had an umbrella over the strobe, and Lisa had proactively purchased this pop-up shelter, which I cowered in the pouring rain, and while she was standing out in the rain. Sorry about that, Lisa. And so this is the image that came from that. These pieces are all lit. That strobe head is hidden behind this woodcarver totem, and you don't really see the production that's involved in some of these photographs. This is also a moment in creating imagery in Alaska where we ditched the strobe system because it just really never stopped raining, and went with flashlights that I was able to buy at the Home Depot. So it was so dark that the flashlights actually gave off enough illumination to light the artwork. And you can see, well, this is not part of that same series, but I was taking photographs and doing a long composite image, not really noticing that the tide was coming in, and there's my camera and tripod in the water, and I had just taken the cable away. My computer was about an inch from getting soaked. It was a hectic moment. Anyway, so this is the image that came from this, right? So setting all this up, here's the flashlights, and here I've got my camera, and I'm inside the tent, and I've got my rubber pants and boots on. They're sticking outside of the tent, and it's pouring rain, and the eagles are flying around. This is on a place called Eagle Beach. But it's a pretty good sized screen, but I can't wait to see this at 10 by 20 or 10 by 30 feet. And this is Lisa and I as we're traveling around the Sound. This was heading over to Bainbridge Island not too long ago, but we continue to travel and make images and seek adventure, and sometimes we even take our kids with us who are still living in town here, and that's super fun. So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, thank you. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how I can incorporate photography into a lot of different other processes. Yes.
Spike, you said that Preston Singletary
Yeah.
work was done in Czechoslovakia. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, the work is cast in the Czech Republic using the lead glass crystal that they're famous for.
Because that's they're good at that.
They excel at that, and there are also less regulations
I see.
regarding safety.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you don't really want to eat out of lead crystal. Yeah, it's what's in a lot of china cabinets. Yes, sir.
I know that country up there, and it's bear country. Did you have any experiences?
Sadly, the only bears that we saw were as we were driving from the airport to the Airbnb where we were staying. A small black bear running down the road, but we were mostly in Juneau, which is a fairly large city at this point. Right now, the population of Juneau swells daily because they've got 5 large cruise ships that come into port there and disgorge every day about 20 to 30,000 people every single day of the week. So it's hard, you know, but we do have some friends up there that have had a lot of experience with wildlife, and I'm looking forward to getting deeper into the more remote areas. Certainly up in Keet-Goonie and beyond. So yeah, if you have any pointers for me. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's I'm always looking for wildlife, definitely.
Just want to give a shout out to a visit to to Union Square. Your work is absolutely magnificent. It's only a couple of blocks away and well worth the visit. Yeah, you go into the building and I think just about every elevator there, right, has some of these images. They're absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. And there's also a new exhibition at 1 Union Square that I haven't seen myself yet. I was just notified about this yesterday, but it's not utilizing still imagery, but video, and I don't really know that much about it other than it's scenic vistas from around the state of Washington. So that, well, a couple of my pieces were just purchased by the SeaTac airport, and they're going to be reproduced as large-scale, like 14-foot long, black and white backlit photographs. And one of them is from the Methau Valley, and one is from that trip that we did up to Vancouver Island last summer. So sadly, my mom wasn't able to come this afternoon, but she's always wondering how it is that we're taking off and traveling and going in with the van, and she thinks it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit frivolous. Yeah, we're just taking vacations all the time, but really, I've just figured out how to make travel an essential part of what it is that we do, and we have to travel to make the images that allow us to travel. So it's that perfect catch-22. So the airport's perfect. Yeah, the airport is going to be great. I'm not sure. The airport is a bit of a mess if you haven't been out there lately, but it's under construction, and these are going to be placed at the entryways to bathrooms, new bathrooms. And well, my images are of trees, and I think it's going to be for the men's bathroom. I don't know. There was a woman selected also for 2 images, and I think she photographs a lot of lakes, and so I don't know, you know. They'll be visible as you're walking by because they're kind of dividers as you go in.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a question. At the beginning, you made a reference to climate change in terms of your project. One of these photographs that you showed us definitely documented what's affecting the trees, and some of them were dead and stuff. Do you include that point of view in labels, or do you expect to write about it, or what?
Yeah, yes. The question was about climate change and how I'm addressing that as an aspect of what's going on in creating these images. Definitely, we're addressing that, and a big part of what Preston and I are doing collaboratively now is to voice our concern about that, as well as championing the rights of Indigenous and Native peoples. We're always pushing that message. And I have been a long-time proponent of saving the salmon. Coming at this from the scientist point of view, I've seen how the Puget Sound has transformed radically in the past 40 years since I was in high school and teaching nature awareness at the Seattle Aquarium. Even just in the time that I've spent working on these trees, which has been about the past 20 years, I've seen the forests of Washington changing. They're drying out, and the trees aren't able to keep up. You know, they need to move north, and it's happening everywhere. The redwoods are moving north to Washington, and the cedars are moving north. It just takes them a while. You know, they are slow movers, but they're resilient, and I have complete faith in. Yes, and so are we. So I have complete faith in the trees and in us, and I appreciate you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Spike.
Thank you, Spike.